Hey guys, so it's been a while since I uploaded my last video, probably more than a year, I guess. Yeah, but I found some time and I spent a lot of time like researching, not really researching, but testing a little bit with the unlimited format. And you might have read in the title and thought to yourself, oh, that's so clickbaity, but it's actually true. This is the best deck that you can build with Pokemon cards. The list might not be entirely perfect, and of course it depends on what kind of opponents you expect. If you just expect a random opponent or an opponent who is only specializing for unlimited format. However, this deck is really strong, and I just wanted to explain how it works, and I will also show a video clip at the end, so you can actually see it in action. So the most important thing about this is the Sableye with Overeager. If it's the only Pokemon in your if it's a Pokemon in your starting hand and you choose it as your active Pokemon, you go first, even if you lost the coin flip, unless your opponent also has Sableye. Which means that in Unlimited, you have so many item cards that you can do almost everything in your first turn. You have to start Sableye and you have to win the coin flip. And this deck is really strong because it can play only Sableyes. It doesn't need any basic Pokemon other than Sableye. So you always start Sableye, which means you always go first, unless of course your opponent starts Sableye and you lost the coin flip. But other than that, you will go first. Both attacks are really nice as well. So Impersonate, you can search your deck for a supporter card, and then use the effect after discarding it. This doesn't really help you a lot if you went first, but if you actually went second, and there is almost nothing you can do as long as you can attack, you can use supporter cards. So you might realize that this makes the mirror match really weird, but yeah, with Impersonate you can get out of a lot of situations you might come into, and then Overconfident only deals 10 damage, but with Special Darkness you deal 20 damage, and if the opponent active Pokemon actually has fewer remaining HP than Sableye, you deal 40. So with a Special Darkness, if your opponent has 50 HP left or less, then you always take a one-hit knockout. Yeah, so with Sableye you can finish games really fast. Of course, it doesn't really matter too much. Actually, if Sableye only had the ability and the Pokebody and no attack at all, it would still be the best Pokemon to play, but of course, having the two broken attacks just makes it even better. Yeah, then one of the most important cards in this deck is Rocket's Trap. You flip a coin, and if heads, your opponent shuffles 3 random hand cards. So you play this card as often as you can, turn 1. And after you played it quite often, then your opponent shouldn't have any hand cards left. Of course, without hand cards, you can't really do a lot. You can only attack. If your active Pokemon doesn't need energy to attack, which, yeah, like we already saw, Sableye doesn't need any energy to attack, so your opponent will probably always start Sableye. And then the only thing they can do is attack after they have no hand cards. Another really good card is Sneak Attack. It allows you to look at your opponent's hand and then only take one trainer card away. And this is a very old card, so trainer card here still means all trainers, so supporter and stadium cards including, but it itself only counts as an item card. So you can use Junk Arm, for example, to get it back. So this means that, of course, in Unlimited, you can see this deck list. There are only 5 cards in the whole deck, which are not trainer cards. So against other Unlimited deck, this is just a really strong, you can always get one card out of their hand. And you also see the rest of the hand, so maybe there is a card, especially if your opponent has 2 hand cards left, then one of them is actually like another Sableye or a Junk Arm, for example. They can't use it anyways. So with this, you can gain information and just get the hand size more efficiently down. And also, if you will have a lot of mulligans, so your opponent usually has more than 6 hand cards at the beginning. And of course, if you flip heads twice, then maybe there is usually only 1 or 2 hand cards in your opponent's hand left. And then you can just use Sneak Attack without flipping any coins. And yeah, with Item Finder and Junk Arm, you can use them quite often. So the next thing, your opponent doesn't have any hand cards anymore. What's next? Yeah, of course, Trick Shuffle. Funny trivia, there's actually a typo here. They forgot a space after the first sentence. You can look at your opponent's deck the top card, and then you can discard it if you want to. And this card is insane. You can just do this. You can play a lot of trick shovels until your opponent has a card on top of their deck which they can't use. And you will see in this deck there are a lot of cards that draw you cards, but there are also a lot of cards that don't draw you cards. And these cards are essentially worthless. And with Trick Shovel, you just play Trick Shovel until you hit one of these cards, which don't hit your opponent at the moment, and then you just pull it back. And what this means, your opponent has no hand cards left, and you know that the top card of their deck is not going to happen. So for example, yeah, even a Trick Shovel, like if your opponent has a Trick Shovel on top of their deck, it doesn't matter as long as your hand is good, even if they play the Trick Shovel on you, and your top deck card isn't that great, is really good. Like they can discard it or they can put it back if it's not good, but nothing really changes. You're still winning the game. And if they play it on themselves, nothing changes anymore because you can play your Trick Shovels next turn anyways. And then there are a lot of other cards which just don't do anything on in the situations. So with Trick Shovel, yeah, you can just get rid of your opponent's hand cards. So what this means is you always go first because you can only start Sableye. You get rid of your opponent's hand cards, and then you can decide which card they draw. And because of this, your opponent can't do anything. And this is why this is the strongest deck. There's nothing that can get in your way. You take every possibility from them before they can react. So the only thing they can do is actually attack with Impersonate. And yeah, what this means, we'll come to that later. First of all, some staple cards which you will need in unlimited decks like these that play a lot of items is Junk Arm. I already mentioned that a few times. You can discard 2 cards from your hand, then search your discard pile for a trainer card. For this, because it's a hard gold or silver card, here trainer actually only means items. This will get a little bit confusing because it got changed over time. But yeah, Junk Arm can only get you item cards, which is not called Junk Arm. And it says trainer here on top, but of course, if it only says trainer and nothing else, then it's also an item card. And you just put that into your hand. So because we already mentioned that Rocket Strap is also counting as an item card, or a trainer for that matter, you can take Rocket Strap with Junk Arm, and also you can take Trick Shovel with Junk Arm. So Junk Arm just gives you 4 extra of whatever you need. But 4 is not enough. You also have Item Finder. This card also gives you a trainer card back, but because it's a base set card, it actually gives you extra trainer cards back, so you can take supporter and stadium cards as well, which is quite nice, but not that important. If this would only take your item cards, it would still be really good. Does the same thing as Junk Arm, just allows you to play the strong cards even more. And then as the extra 9th card, you have a Dowsing Machine, which is again the same effect. Just gives you a lot of cards. So this wouldn't really work if you didn't have other item cards, which draw you a lot of cards, of course. For draw power, you, in most formats, actually needed Pokemon that draw cards. But in the very early formats, there were no supporter cards, and there weren't really Pokemon that actually drew you cards. So you had item or trainer cards, which yeah, got you what you needed. And this is why we have this card here in Unlimited, Professor Oak. Just the same effect exists in the current standard as well, but it's a supporter card. This Professor Oak is an item, so you can play 4 of them in one turn. And like we already saw with Junk Arm and Item Finder, Dowsing Machine, you can play even more of them in your first turn. So with these Professor Oaks, you can just draw through your whole deck, and you wouldn't really need much else. Of course, you want to have a good chance to have a good starting hand, and you can only play 4 Professor Oak, so you have to fill other cards in. One of these cards that you just play to have something to draw cards is Build Teleporter. It's the same effect as Roller Skates, but you draw 1 card extra, so you flip a coin effect, draw 4. Yeah, this gives you 1 additional card, so 50-50 you draw 0, and 50-50 you draw 2. And if you actually draw 2, then yeah, you have 1 extra card. This was kind of messed up. So yeah, because you always draw 2 cards if you add the coin flip to it. So it always gives you more cards than you had before. Of course, if you flip heads, you draw 4, and then lose 1, so you have 3 more. But if you flip tails, you lose 1 card, so you have -1. In the middle of that is 2. Sorry, I don't know the exact name for that in English, but yeah, Blitz Teleporter just gives you some cards, and even if you flip tails, often you can either just use Junk Arm for anything else, or you have a Professor Oak in your hand anyways. So yeah, kind of a safe card. Sometimes you have this as the only valid draw cards on your starting hand. Then of course it's kind of sad that you flip tails, but that happens quite rarely. Another really broken card in this format actually is Poker Draw Plus. This is also the only way to search your deck. It works kind of like Puzzle of Time, where you can play either 1 or 2. If you play 1, you draw 1 card. If you play 2, you search your deck for any 2 cards. In Unlimited, this is way better than playing Puzzle of Time, because Puzzle of Time, if you only play 1, doesn't get you anywhere, but Poker Draw Plus actually gives you 1 extra card. So you don't lose hand cards, but if you play 2, if you have them very early, and this is always your turn 1. The most important turn is the first turn, so the deck cards are more important to get. Yeah, so Poker Draw Plus, really strong. Another really unfair card actually is Trainer's Mail. Yeah, you can look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and then take a trainer card from there. Trainer's Mail actually only gets you all trainer cards and not items or whatever. So here trainer actually means trainer. You can get stadium cards and Sabolo cards, and what this means is there are only 5 cards in that whole deck that Trainer's Mail can't get. So really strong. There is no way for you actually. And only in the very first turn, if you have still 3 Sableye, the 3 you didn't start with, and the Darkness Energy in your deck, that you will find like an empty. And of course, you can take other Trainer's Mails, so there is that. But you will always grab something. But it gives you the option to just return everything, which makes it even better. Which makes it even better. The next card is Pokédex Handy, kind of like Acrobike, but better because you don't discard the other one. The resources are still kind of problematic. You discard a lot with Professor Oak and Junk Arm, Item Finder, and that kind of stuff. And this is why Pokédex Handy is really nice. You choose 1 out of 2. You never lose hand cards. You can't whiff. But the other card is not discarded. So you can, in this case, often you actually take the worst card. So you just have something to discard. Like you play 9 of these Item Finder cards, and if you already have 2 of them in your hand and you play Pokédex Handy and see a third one, you can actually put that on bottom of your deck. So with Acrobike, of course, you always have to take the better one because the other one gets discarded. But here, depending on your hand, you can take the good one on the bottom and then draw it later. Yeah, so that's it for the whole consistency. And yeah, like I already mentioned, without any hand cards, the only thing you can do is attack, which is if you start with Sableye, but of course your opponent might start with something else. There are other Pokemon that can draw cards. So for example, there's this Ipom, which your opponent might have on the bench. And then there's this Unknown, which if you have 3 special Unknowns and only 1 hand card, which you will always have because, yeah, we already get rid of all hand cards. And then you drop deck, then you can draw until you have 7. And Ipon actually just draws 1. But you can control this 1 card they draw, and like you see, there's so much consistency in these decks that this might just give them the card they need to win. And you want to prevent this. So against Pokemon Power and Poke Power, you have a card called, don't know if I pronounce this correct, Cessation Crystal. It's like Garbodor, but just an item. You don't need to evolve, it's just always there. Really, really strong. It says that your opponent, both players can't use any Pokemon Power, Poke Powers or Poke Bodies And this also includes the Pokemon powers from the base set, something I actually didn't know for quite a while. It doesn't block abilities, but it blocks the Pokemon powers from before there were Poke powers and Poke Buddies. Yeah, you use a Poke Buddy, which is really crucial for your strategy, but of course it only matters once, and that is always already gone before Precision Crystal is in play. So this just prevents a lot of options your opponent can have. Another thing that might happen is your opponent can start with Oranguru. Yeah, if they start Oranguru, of course, they can use Instruct and then they draw 3 cards, which is even worse. And this is why you play 1 Silent Lab. So one way for your opponent to win might be that they start Oranguru and you have your Silent Lab in the prize cards. That would be really unfortunate, but it doesn't make any sense. The existence of Silent Lab and the fact that it can't fit in this deck without completely messing with the consistency just makes your opponent to try and start with Sableye instead just much more better, because if they start Sableye, they have the 50-50 chance to win with the coin flip. But if they play for a 10% chance that you prize your Silent Lab, then that's just worse. So Silent Lab just prevents the opponent from using Oranguru. And this is the only reason this card is in the deck. Maybe in the future they will release another basic Pokemon which does something similar, but currently this is the Oranguru counter. Yeah, like already mentioned, Impersonate doesn't need any energy cards, so your opponent can use Impersonate for a supporter card, which then can mess with you. Too bad there's a card, Hold'em Circle, which says that the next player who wants to attack can't attack. So the next player who attacks just discards the Hold'em Circle instead of attacking. Which means if your opponent starts Sableye, in your first turn you just need to play Hold'em Circle, and then they can't impersonate, they have no hand cards, then they can't do anything anymore. Yeah, so this is why Hold'em Circle is quite nice. There is also the Guzzlord. You can play Guzzlord in Unlimited, which is a funny deck. It's not really good, but I have it built. And if your Hold'em Circle is prized, you always lose against Guzzlord, because they always draw an energy, and then they always can just take the knockout. But of course, it's a 10% chance to have the Hold'em Circle in your prize card, so you will always, usually you will win. So really unlikely to lose. But yeah, Hold'em Circle, I actually only added this because of Guzzlord, but it just wins you the mirror match as well if you go first. I didn't know this card existed. Like, I posted a list on Facebook which had energy removal, the old one, which is like Crushing Hammer but doesn't flip a coin in my deck. And then May said, yeah, you can just play Hold'em Circle. I didn't know the card. I always saw it and it just looked weird. I didn't really read it. And then I read it again and was like, oh wow, your opponent can't impersonate. That's crazy. Yeah, so Hold'em Circle. The last thing you might think is, wait, there is a card, I remember. There's a really strong card which was in the same format as Sableye actually, called Spiritomb, with Keystone Seal. Both players can play trainer cards, which on the Spiritomb means item cards. So if your opponent actually starts with Spiritomb, what can you do? Yeah, I don't know if it's unfortunately or fortunately, but there's a card called Space Center, which just prevents all Poke Buddies from basic Pokemon, which means just Spiritomb basically. Space Center was actually never together in the format with Spiritomb, so it wasn't even intended to be like a counter, but in Unlimited it works. There are only 2 Space Center in my deck. The reason for that is that I might even only play 1 and then 4 Skylar, but I don't want the Space Center to be priced, just in case my opponent starts Spiritomb, so that's why I play 2. And the other slots I can just fill with Skylar, because it's much more versatile. You can, if your starting hand isn't good, but you only have a Skylar in your hand, then you can use Skylar for Professor Oak, for example, and then win against your opponent starting Sableye. If in this situation it would be Space Center, then you couldn't do anything and you would lose. And in weird situations, you can use Impersonate for Skylar, and then search your deck for a card, which might also be useful. Sometimes you kind of run dry. But if you know you can just Impersonate for Skylar, you can use like your last hand card for Junk Arm, Trick Shovel, something like that, and then just Impersonate for Skylar to get something out of your deck. Yeah, so there is nothing that can stop this deck. If you spend a lot of attention and you realize, oh wait, only basic Pokemon don't work in this deck, so in theory, if your opponent has Trevenant in play, then you also lose, right? And this is actually true. I plan to do a video on Trevenant as well. It's actually a valid deck, not too bad. That's like a 35% matchup against this. So not really good, but at least it's something. Yeah, so there's no card which can prevent Trevenant from just being there and destroying your strategy completely. The problem is that Trevenant is actually weak to darkness. So Sableye deals 40 damage for 1 energy against it. Which means Sableye goes first, and if you start as Phantom, then of course they get their full turn. You have no hand cards, and even if you top deck the energy or Wally or something like that, you can just evolve and you still don't have anything. You will get 40 damage, and then you need to top deck this single turn, and otherwise, yeah, you get knocked out. So you get 10 off laser, of course. So you're at 100 HP, get 40 damage. Then you have 50 damage. Yeah, so you still have 2 turns, but nothing really valid here. So there are a few other like tech cards I have in here, which you might actually cut for more consistency. If you don't expect your opponent to play like a weird unlimited deck. Lysander just gives you 1 extra card if your opponent actually starts Spiritomb. Only Spiritomb doesn't do anything against you. So they need to have something. And if they bench that something, you can use Lysander and then you have no item block anymore. You can get your Space Center and then you win. So that's why Lysander is a cool option. There is another deck which you can outplay with a Lysander. I will explain that later in details. It's kind of complicated, but basically they start Sableye and then they set up a Pokemon on the bench. But if you play Lysander, then they can't really do anything anymore. And that's why just Lysander is important to have in your deck. Getsus is just a really terrible card. I don't like it at all. It used to be quite cool right after it came out because you could look at your opponent's hand and kind of outplay some situations. Currently, it's just, yeah, sometimes you just win against it because the opponent has a weird hand. In Unlimited, you can impersonate for Getsus. So in a mirror match, if you have your Hold on Circle in the prize card, so I will put this up again. Hold on Circle says nobody can attack. If you don't have this going first, then going second, your opponent can impersonate for Getsus, and then you have no hand cards anymore. The only thing you can do against that is to end your turn with the Skylar in your hand, and then you can use Skylar for whatever. But you run really low on resources, so it might be that your opponent still can get around you. Bridget is quite a cool card. You can use Impersonate for Bridget to get all the other Sableyes on your bench. This is also the reason why there are actually 4 Sableyes in the deck list, because you would only need 1. Playing only 1, then you can use like 2, maybe even 3 red cards. That works a lot better in general. And you need less cards, so you can cut the Bridget and then 3 of your Sableye for 2 or 3 red cards and then a consistency card. But since you can impersonate for Bridget, there are some lock decks which you can outplay by just using a lot of impersonates for. Yeah, you can use impersonate for Bridget the first time, then impersonate for Skylar maybe, and then you can use Trump card and Lysander always. So with Bridget you can outplay some strategies, which is also really cool. Just a good card to have. But like I said, if you don't expect your opponent to play like an actual unlimited deck, then you don't need Bridget at all. You can use an additional consistency card. There isn't really much that you can actually add here. You can play acrobikes, which is also... I used to play like 2 acrobikes and then 2 red cards as well. And then the most important card, which kind of makes this deck so good, is Lysander's trump card. Like I said, you need a lot of cards, and if you flip some Tates in the early game, in the early game here means the early part of your turn. If you flip a lot of Tates there, then you might actually not get through the part where you can use Trickshot for your opponent's deck. But with Lysander's trump card, you get 2 cycles of your whole deck. So your first turn, you burn through your whole deck twice. So the first time, you just go through your whole deck, and you just need to get rid of your opponent's hand cards. And even if you used every single card of your whole deck, just to get rid of your opponent's hand cards, you can use trump card. And then you have your whole deck back. And as long as you did have a Junk Arm, or Professor Oak, or Trainer's Mail, anything that is kind of consistency in your hand together with trump card, you can then draw your whole deck again, and then you can use the trick shovels. And after you got rid of your opponent's hand once, then you don't need to use the rocket straps anymore. You just play trump card, a lot of trick shovels, and this every turn, trump card, a lot of trick shovels, go through your whole deck. And without trump card, this deck would still work. The list would need to look a lot different, and it wouldn't be like as unbeatable as it is currently. Yeah, but with trump card, you can just play everything. Trump card is actually banned and expanded, but there is no banned list for unlimited. I can actually put you the link in the description for the unlimited banned list. It's just empty, so there's just no cards. You can play every card there is. Released in English, which has the actual card bag and does not the extra size. There are some weird cards that don't make any sense, which only exist as a big card, so you can play it, of course. Yeah, and then what goes along with trump card is Verse Seeker. This is just an extra card to make sure that you never run out of trump cards, so you can always get your deck back. You could use Item Finder and Dowsing Machine, so there are 5 cards that can get you the trump card immediately as well. But with Verse Seeker, you can also use Junk Arm, and you just have the additional cards to get the trump cards back. Another thing that you might have wondered is if you use Hold and Circle, you can attack yourself, so you can't deal damage. Yeah, of course. It's always so weird that they have so many weird broken cards, which now in retrospect just seem silly. But there exists a card which you can just use to deal a lot of damage by just passing your turn, basically. And this is Hypnotoxic Laser. Yeah, your opponent is poisoned, so they get 10 damage, and then you just need to use all your trick shovels, and at some point you will draw into the Hold on Circle and just put it in play again. And if it's the only active Pokemon of your opponent, then you can attack afterwards. You attack with this card. It's only 1, so if it's prized, you are forced to use Hypnotoxic Laser to win the game. But of course, that doesn't matter. You can also use Hypnotoxic Laser, it works just as good. Darkness Energy can help you against stuff like Trevenant, for example. It's quite important to have. And other lock decks. But you might get your first turn through, and you can actually draw your whole deck, then attach your Darkness Energy. But afterwards, you get the item lock. Yeah, their Darkness Energy is just great to have. And in a mirror match, actually after the first turn, the game is usually over, because it's not really likely that your opponent draws 2 Sableyes on their starting hand. And they can't impersonate, so you play Laser, attach Darkness Energy, and if the top card doesn't win them immediately, then you just attack and win, because you take out the only Pokemon they have. Yeah, and then I have some stats prepared here. Sableye start is 100%. You will always start Sableye. But you have 65% of mulligan, which means that your opponent will draw quite some cards usually in a normal game. I have something prepared for that as well. So here's the one stat which I call usable hand. It's 93%, which is really high. And what this means is just cards that what was I saying? Just cards that you can use to do something with. I actually prepared something for that as well. So the cards you can see here are the list of cards which just are usable. So if you have these on your starting hand, you can do anything, at least anything. So if you draw Professor Oak, of course, it's a really good starting hand. First teleport, if you only have a Bills teleport in your hand, of course, you have a 50-50 chance of losing. But what is not included here is, for example, if you have Bill and a Junker, then of course you flip 2 coins. Or if you have Bill and 2 Junkers, that's not included here. What is also in this calculation is the only 1 Poké Draw plus, and then you have about 1 of 4 chance to draw into the other cards which are selected here. So not perfect, but it just gives you a good estimate. If you have Scout on your starting hand, like I already said, you can just search your deck for Professor Oak. You can't trump card anymore if you did that, but more often than enough, you actually don't need the trump card in your first turn. And also looking at this, so for example, all the cards which are a bit like darker here are the cards that you can leave on top of your opponent's deck if you use Trick Shovel. And you see, these are a lot of cards. Yeah, so often the first 2 Trick Shovels actually get you already at a point where they can't do anything anymore. Yeah, so Skylar's a good consistency card, and Ghetsis will usually draw you 3. And yeah, what is also not included, for example, you can hit Trick Shovel and Junk Arm. And I had one game in my life where I actually played against someone. Yeah, if he's seeing this video, he might remember. And I had my hand was really bad. But I had 2 Trick Shovels and a Junk Arm, so I played 2 Trick Shovels, and the second Trick Shovel actually got me Professor Oak. And then I could discard that and then use Junk Arm for Oak. This is also not included. Yeah, but 93% of just to be able to play. And then you have a 49% chance of getting a Space Center. So, yeah, I already talked about that. You can either draw Space Center or Skylar. These are 5 cards. That's like 44% to have in your starting hand because they are not basic Pokemon. And then you have like a 5% chance of top decking either of them in case you whiff them in your starting hand already. Yeah, so that's about the stats here. Oh, I actually forgot to show the graph. So here is a graph of how likely it is that your opponent will have a certain amount of mulligan. So you can see here 1 mulligan is about 22%. 0 mulligan is 35%, of course. That's the 35% chance of just having a Sableye in your hand. I showed earlier it's 65% to have no basic on your starting hand. Yeah, so the other part is to have one immediately. And as you can see, it like at the 10 mark, it kind of evens out. So then it's really, really unlikely that you will get more than 10 mulligans. But it also means that 10 mulligans is not too weird of a situation. So most part here is in about 5. So you kind of have to expect your opponent to start with 11 or 12 hand cards. 12 hand cards means you need 4 heads on your Team Rocket. Of course, if you play against another unlimited deck, they kind of cancel each other out. So Your opponent will have a lot of mulligans too, but 12 hand cards on your opponent's starting hand is not too unlikely. And this is why the additional Team Rocket's sneak attack was so important, because it just gives you one extra card to have, and with Junk Arm you can prevent you from being forced to use a coin flip. And then if your opponent only has like 4 hand cards left, maybe one of them is a Junk Arm, and if they have a Junk Arm as their last hand card, and if they top deck a bad card, then they can't use the Junk Arm anyways. Yeah, so the mulligans aren't too great, because this deck directly faces a problem if your opponent has if you have a mulligan, which other decks don't really. So if you have a donk deck which wins in the first turn, it doesn't matter how many hand cards your opponent has. Even if he has their whole deck after the mulligans and only like 1 card left, so they don't deck out. For other decks that doesn't matter, but for this deck it's really important because you need to get rid of your opponent's hand cards. And this is why sometimes you might lose, like if you have a 10, it's like 1% that you get 10 mulligans. And if that happens, you can still win, but it's really unlikely. Yeah, so I prepared a game, which I played in Stuttgart, after we were finished with the original championship stream, which I will show you and then try to explain what's going on there. And you can see actually how the deck works in action. So yeah, here we have me playing against Maurice. I'm playing a really funny Brock Ninetales deck, and Maurice is playing the Shovellock. And he won the coin flip, he goes first. I actually started with Ditto, which copies the opponent, so it also has overeager ability, but yeah, I didn't win the coin flip. Here we see the Bill's Teleporter. He flipped heads, so he can draw 4 cards. He has a lot of hand cards, another heads, so he has yeah, quite a few hand cards. My hand isn't looking too great, so he needs to flip like 2 heads and then get the sneak attack along the way. Then the game is pretty much over. He plays Getsys turn 1, which is also really good against other unlimited decks. So I have to put 2 hand cards into my deck, and he can just draw 2 cards. I think he actually forgot to draw 2 cards, which makes it even sadder that I still lost. Yeah, so now you can see the hands are already kind of useless, so there isn't really much to do there. Here we see the first Rocket's Trap. It's tails, but you can use Junk Arm to just get it back and try again. So 2 tails in a row, but in an actual game you might like a Laserhead's tails. It's kind of unfortunate situation. In Unlimited it doesn't matter, you have so many options. Yeah, with a dowsing machine too, for another one. And this actually heads, so I'm only left with 1 hand card. And the worst card that could be is the Tierno, which we already saw. So yeah, Maurice knows he can just use Trick Shovel and nothing will happen. So as long as that 1 card, which is now on top, which we will actually show, let's say Brock Ninetales, that doesn't help me at all. I cannot play this card, and even if I could, doesn't matter. So now Maurice is at the end of his turn. He used a Trick Shovel, he saw, okay, this card is not good. Because of the Getsys, in most cases this is the sneak attack. He knew that my hand is not good. I actually revealed which card he didn't hit with the Rocket Strap earlier. It's a Vulpix. So yeah, there's nothing I can do. But because of Transform, Ditto has access to Impersonate. So I can use Impersonate for Bridget and then prevent me from losing so fast. And this is what every deck does. Just have Bridget handy, so if the Trick Shovel deck didn't draw too well, which Maurice actually didn't. He played a Getsys and then he had to play Skylar. If the Trick Shovel would have gotten me a good card and then the second card would have been good as well, I might have actually won. But yeah, like we already discussed, not too likely, which means that he can just use Skylar for Professor Oak, and then play Professor Oak to draw 7 new cards. And he can continue. He just needs to play some trick shovels. I don't have any hand cards. He knows that I have a Brock Nightcase in my hand, which I could evolve, but that doesn't help me because it can't really attack. Can't do anything in this situation. This teleporter won't draw cards this time. And the only thing I can do here is to just hope he doesn't draw well. We saw that like 90% figure that he draws into an unusable hand. But if you already use Professor Oak, then this gets even more unlikely because you have the added junk arms, which you can just use to get your Oak back. So here we see the Cessation Crystal. In theory, I might have been able to do something with the Brock's Nightheads, but now with the Cessation Crystal, there's nothing I can really do. I can't even use Dildo anymore because it also gets shot off, which means that its HP go down to 50 as well. So now if he just has an energy, he can already take the knockout. He actually got the laser, so the Cessation Crystal didn't really matter this turn. There still hasn't been any trick shots this turn, so there's still like a really low chance, but he still has a lot of his deck left. Here's another Rocket Trap, and it's important to just play them down because this one card that is on their hand since the first turn, this is now another card which might be on top of the deck again. So it just makes your chances better, and often it's, you would just discard them with Professor Oak anyways. If you have a junk arm or an item finder, you can just discard it with that. You will see him discarding a Pokemon Collector. He doesn't know the list, so maybe there is something like, if I have like a 1/1 Phantom Trevenant in my deck and Wally, then I could play Collector for Phantom, then put Phantom on the bench, and then use Impersonate for Wally to evolve into Trevenant. And then I can, like we already said, I can draw 3 cards with this Trevenant because he can't knock it out, and it gives me some time. And then I might draw what I need to win. So that's why he can discard the Pokemon Collector. If he didn't discard it, of course, he knows my deck list. There's nothing I can do with the Pokemon Collector in it. But he also has a really big deck left, and he didn't even trump card yet. So he managed to find the Darkness Energy. He didn't even know if it was priced or not, because like I already said, there is no way to check your price cards unless you have 2 Pokédraw at once. Here's another Trick Shovel. It's a Screw Up Cycler, which doesn't do anything in this situation again. I can make myself lose faster if I play it, because then I have less Pokemon play. That's all this card can do. I can also just win 1 turn by using it on a Poison Sableye, but that won't really help. Just so you know, the Porygon has free retreat, so I can just promote it and then put back the wrong part here. And I can use Impersonate for Wally to evolve into Porygon 2. Because of Cessation Crystal, Porygon 2 can't do anything. But I just put it in play. At this point, I can fill up my deck the best way with Wally. Gets rid of 1 extra card. And I just need to hope that he messes up somehow. So now it's back to his turn. Just need to do the same things over and over again. I actually conceded that game at some point, but this is the first trump card. So these useless cards from my discard pile, the Bridget, the Pokemon Collector, are now all in my deck again. So yeah, trump card helps with that sometimes as well. But of course, Maurice gets all of his trick shovels back, and this is all he needs to win now. Just play some trick shovels and wait. Yeah, and at this point, I think you all understood what this is about. So I thank you very much for watching. I can, I think I promised that I will do a second part of the last video I did, which never went upload. I think it was like half finished. I didn't actually finish it, so yeah, maybe I will do another video if I find some time. Yeah, so thank you very much for watching, and maybe see you next time.